Welcome students, today I'm going to be ranking all the places we visited for our Exploring Every Harry Potter Filming Locations video. I've condensed them down to these 59 places and we'll be ranking them against these categories, which I'll explain as we move on. First up, Alnwick Castle. I am going to go and put this in a must-see straight away. To me, Alnwick Castle felt the most Hogwartsy and really spoke to the nostalgia of the first two films. But there's a lot of other things to do there as well. It really is a remarkable castle with all kinds of activities going on. There's archery and of course there's the Poison Garden as well. In terms of Harry Potter filming locations, it's a big one featuring in the first two films and inspiring the castle, I think, for the later films as well, so it's got to go up there. Next one, not quite the same scale. We have Australia House in London, and this is the Australia mission. It's not somewhere I think you can just walk in, so I'm going to put this one in the area, and this is a sort of a category for if you happen to be passing by, if you're very close, or if you're really keen like me. Again, a really lovely, interesting building, and the interior looks amazing, although we didn't really get to see that from standing outside in the rain. Next up, Black Park. Now this is an interesting one because of course there's nothing there anymore that resembles Hogwarts in a way, but so much was filmed there that it's really quite interesting. I'm going to put Black Park in my worth a detour category, so not worth a visit really on its own just to go see that unless you're quite local, but it's worth going out of your way for. So much was filmed there, and trying to imagine the whole of Hogsmeade Station being built at that crossroad, it's quite something. And the park itself is rather nice. Next up, we have Blenheim Palace. So we didn't get the chance to spend much time at Blenheim Palace. It was sort of the tail end of one of our trips. We pretty much raced to the tree, costumed up, and raced back. The tree was very impressive in its own right, and the gardens around did look very nice. It seemed like the tickets were a little more costly than visiting Alnwick Castle. We'll say it's worth a visit. It's a bit of a pricey one, so maybe you wouldn't want to just have it as a detour. It's not a must-see. It's not on the same level for a Harry Potter enthusiast, I don't think, as Alnwick Castle, but it's definitely a nice and interesting place. Next up, we have the Bodleian Library. So we've got Duke Humphrey's Library, which unfortunately we didn't get to see, and the Divinity School underneath. And there's all sorts of other parts as well, and I think you can visit quite a number of them. And this one I think is definitely worth a visit because you can go there to see the Bodleian Library. And if you've got enough time in Oxford, there's a few other places you can visit as well, like Christchurch, as long as you book your tickets nice and early to get in, or New College. This next location is Burnham Beeches. Now this one was very nice, but it is quite out of the way, and again there's nothing really pottery to see other than a nice wood. I think for this one it's going to go straight into in the area. It was quite a walk to get to the spot, but it was very secluded and very nice. Other than the planes flying overhead, you were quite alone in nature. Our next place is the first location for the borough, and it's the little park right by the studio on Gypsy Lane. This one, I think, I don't want to put it in maybe not, because there is something interesting about it, and there's a good chance that if you're in the area, if you're going to the studio tour, you will be very close, and it's worth it, I think. There's a couple of places that are very close to the studio that I think I'll put in the area. If they were anywhere else, they would probably be a maybe not. If you were staying near the studio, as opposed to taking the bus from the centre of London, it would definitely be worth checking some of these out if you had some spare time. Our next one's Christchurch. Now, of course, I got to visit Christchurch, but sadly they had run out of tickets, so we weren't able to go in, and I would have very much liked to, and hopefully one day will. I wouldn't mind seeing the staircase and the little hallway that were used as filming locations, but it would also be very nice to see the hall that inspired the Great Hall at Christchurch. I think due to the Bodleian Library being up there in Take a Visit, Christchurch will be up there too. I feel like you can visit all three of the Oxford locations. Be a nice pottery trip. Our next location is this teeny little alleyway, which is kind of close to Piccadilly Circus. Now, this teeny little alleyway was just used for the sort of big CGI opening shot of the Death Eaters heading into Diagon Alley. There's not really much to see there. It's gated off. It wasn't really, it was the basis of what was seen in that shot, but wasn't really what was seen in that shot. So I think this might be our first, maybe not. Next up we have Durham Cathedral. They used Durham Cathedral a lot for the first two films, using the cloister area. The hallways there were used for a lot of going between classes. That little patch of grass in the middle, of course, was used for a few scenes. And then, of course, there was Professor McGonagall's classroom scene in the first two films. And I think I've talked myself into putting it into must-see. It felt really nice. It was a really nice location to visit. We enjoyed walking up to it. It was on quite a hill, but it was really interesting streets, some old, nice cobbled streets to walk up to. There's the castle there as well, although you can only go into it at certain times, because it's, in fact, the dormitory, or part of the dormitory for the University of Durham, which is very interesting, and a very cool dormitory. How Harry Pottery can you get than having your dormitory in a castle? Our next location is Freshwater West in Wales. Now, this location is probably the furthest to reach on the list, with it being pretty much on the most westerly tip of Wales. It's a really nice location, a lovely beach, and there are such touching tributes to Harry Potter and Dobby on the beach as well. I'm going to put it in worth a detour. Now, if it was easier to get to, it probably would lose half its beauty, because it is quite isolated. But it feels a bit wrong to put it in worth a detour, but it is quite a distance. I might have to leave it there. It's a difficult one to get to. Our next location is Frifthden Beeches. This one is very nice, but very boggy when we went. But unfortunately, I found out recently that Cedric's tree has split, so sadly we can't see that. But it's a nice spot, so we'll put it, if you're in the area, it's worth going to and having a look. Our next location, this is our first one in Scotland. We're doing things in alphabetical order today, just to really mix things up. We have the field in Glencoe that became Hagrid's hut, and there's Snape stood right there. This one's a fun one. It's an extremely awesome location to see all these mountains around and feel quite isolated. You're not actually far from a road. It's just at the bottom of the hill behind Snape there. There's a road hidden that was only a few hundred meters from Hagrid's hut the entire time. And that road leads straight onto a main road heading up to Fort William. This one definitely is going to be ranking high. I think the only thing that might let this one down is the difficult nature of actually getting up to it. So I believe they created a path going up to it from a nearby inn. That path doesn't seem to really be there anymore, so you need to make your way up the muddy slopes. And that wasn't too easy, or at least getting down looked quite scary. This is pretty crazy. It doesn't look as steep on camera, but it is absolutely crazy. It's definitely worth going to that area though, I think, because it is a gorgeous, gorgeous area. So we're going to put this one in Take a Visit, because you're probably going to be nearby heading to the next must-see, the Glenfinnan Viaduct, or at least the Glenfinnan Viaduct, the Jacobite in general, I think, with this one. Now, I haven't ridden the Jacobite yet, but I do intend to at some point. It is such a scenic route. It's amazing. It's beautiful. I'm so pleased with all of the drone footage I got of the train at some of the other locks. Seeing it pass over the Glenfinnan Viaduct was such a highlight for the trip. It was such a brilliant way to round it off, especially after the ordeal we had actually waiting for the right train. So I'm going to put this one up in the top, a must-see. You can't miss this one. Our next one is Gloucester Cathedral. Again, a really lovely cathedral. Used quite a bit in the first two films. You see a little bit of the cloister being used. You see the hallways being used. And then they returned to it in the Half-Blood Prince, which is really great as well. I'll put in Take a Visit. It's quite near some other nice locations. It's not far from the village of Lacock we'll come to later. So it's worth going and visiting those ones, I think. This is Goathland Station. We were blessed by having an absolutely lovely day there and seeing so many gorgeous steam trains. Well, we saw two gorgeous steam trains and we saw a diesel. I didn't touch on this in the video. It's famous for a show called Heartbeat. And as you're driving through the little town, you might see an old-style police car that may have been used in the show in front of some of the shops and bars that were used in the show. As well as sheep, there's a lot of sheep that are just roaming about and walking over the roads and people's gardens, which was interesting, very different. I think Goathland is going to be a take a visit. It's a little out of the way, but if you're ever sort of Whitby or Pickering area, maybe take a ride on the train. I've heard good things about it. It's a great location, worth a visit. Next one up we have Grassington Moor. My goodness, that was so windy going up there, and it was quite a walk to get to the spot we went to. I knew there was this chimney up there because I'd been there a few weeks ago, so we went to investigate that. Because that chimney sort of was a bit reminiscent of the Lovegoods home to me. It is very out of the way. There's not too much to see. I think it's more of a in the area one. If you're local or if you're passing through, it's worth a nice walk if it's good weather. Or if you're interested in the history of the mining that used to happen there. But I couldn't pinpoint exactly where any of the filming took place, so I think we've put that one in the right place. Next up, we have Claremont Square. Now, Claremont Square wasn't actually used, as I mentioned in the video, as a filming location, but the resemblance between that and the set is striking. It must have been based off that very street, that exact bit. Just like the location of the gate is so perfect to the street, and then just looking at the buildings are almost identical. They did a great job on the set. With it being in London, with it being so close to King's Cross, St Pancras, and not too far from some of the other London locations, it's definitely worth it. That's why I went there, because we were close by already, so I think it's worth a detour. I'm going to put worth a detour. Next up on the list we have Hardwick Hall. Now this one was really nice. I took so much footage there and you barely see any of it in the video. Loads of footage of the insides of all of these wonderful, authentic tapestries all over the walls. Brilliant furnishings inside. The house itself looked really impressive from all angles, and we had really nice weather there as well, which helped. In terms of a Harry Potter filming location, it definitely feels like a wizarding family could live there, but the filming that actually took place there was quite limited. A lot of what we see in the film is sets with it superimposed in the background, or sets which were vaguely based on the interior. That said, it's very cool. I'm gonna have to put it in worth a detour. You can go around the house, you go into so many different rooms there. There's all sorts going on. It's very nice. It's very nice. Our next location is Harrow Boys' School, which had Flitwick's class in its fourth form room. There is a tour where you do get to go inside, I believe, but it seems to be quite infrequent and difficult to get on. We went and just viewed it from the outside. If you can get on the tour, I'm sure it'll be really cool to see that room, and there's probably other parts to it as well which are really nice, but otherwise I don't think it's worth it, so because of the tour we'll whack it up there. Next up we have Snape's Tree at Hatfield House. It was a really nice park and very, very nice gardens. There was a thunderstorm just as we were leaving, which was crazy. because it was really nice weather when we were filming at the tree. The tree itself was really cool to see. If you do go there, don't go touching the tree or breaking the tree, of course. Leave it for other fans to see and for it to just blossom in general. Hatfield House isn't too out of the way in terms of if you're visiting the studio. It's not far from the studio. We'll put it in worth a detour. Next up we have Hermione's house. There wasn't obviously much to see. It was really interesting seeing the church off in the distance, half recreating the shot of Hermione walking down the street towards it for the video. That said, it feels extremely awkward filming near someone's properties at all, and I don't recommend it. They've got a sign up there reminding people it's private property, so they probably get a lot of people trying to recreate that shot in its entirety going up their path and stuff. So I'm going to put this one in maybe not. It's a great shot from the film, but it is a private residence. Next up we have High Malham Power Station. This one as well I think is going to have to be a maybe not. It was really interesting going there and seeing all the wildlife on the bank of the River Trent. But, of course, the cooling towers are no longer there, and that was a big part of the filming location. Not the most interesting place, and it's quite far out. Not worth it, really. Next up we have Ivinghoe Beacon. Now I might be slightly biased because the weather when we were there was pretty horrible. At one point we were hiding behind the sign that's there to get away from the rain that was coming at such an intense angle. We were able to huddle behind this sign. It was a very interesting day. I think it's one that if you're in the area, there seems to be a very nice walk around there. Lots of walkers walking by, and there are some very impressive views, and it does have a lot of impressive history as well. Of course, as a filming location, you don't really see much of it in the films. The focus is all quite tight on like the boot and such and the effects going on. So we'll put this in the area. If you're in the area, it's worth checking out if you got the spare time. Our next location is James and Lily's Fountain. Now this fountain is on the grounds of a hotel which is very, very, very close to the studio tour, and we stayed at this hotel. We got up early in the morning and got some really nice shots of the fountain. It's a lovely little fountain, and the hotel itself is very nice as well. We'll definitely stay there again, I think, if we do the studio tour or are in the area. If you're going to the studio and you want to stay in an actual filming location, it's a good choice. I think we'll put it in worth a detour. I think that's the sort of level it's on. Of course, you probably need to be staying there to actually visit it, unless of course you got permission at the front desk. It's really, really close to the studio as well, so I do wonder if any of the actors ever stayed there. Maybe. Moving on to our next location, we have King's Cross down here. Lots of filming from a lot of the films took place there, and of course it's a location mentioned quite a lot in the book. There is also the Harry Potter shop at platform 9 3/4 there, with the fake trolley going into our wall photo opportunity as well. It's an interesting one. Of course, you probably won't be able to get onto the platform without a ticket. Maybe you could convince them, I don't know. Of course, the bridge isn't there anymore that we see a lot in the films, so we'll put it in worth a detour. It'll be worth it just to see the Harry Potter shop at platform 9 3/4 to some fans, and of course the photo opportunity there, I suppose. And there's a good chance that you might be heading through King's Cross anyway if you're coming up from the north, as I did. And then you'll be able to see the actual pillars that were used. Our next one is Lacock Abbey. Now, Lacock Abbey, I think, is going to have to be another must-see. I think it is. It really is. My reasoning is twofold. There are 4 distinct filming locations at Lacock Abbey. There is the cloister, where we see a lot of activity in the walkways there. There is the chapter house, which is the home to the Mirror of Erised and the study room. We also have Snape's classroom and Professor Quirrell's classroom, so there's a lot in one, and it really feels very Philosopher's Stone-y, and that's where it all began, isn't it? Secondly, if you're going to the Abbey, you'll also be going to the village of Lacock, and that provided several filming locations as well. It was really nice walking around Lacock Abbey too. I got a lot of footage inside there and saw a lot of other lovely, cool stuff. Loads of nice furniture, loads of nice oddities from the past. And unfortunately, I didn't get to show much in the video. I was trying to, keep on topic and move from one to the other at a fair pace. It was about £20-something, so on par, I think, with Alnwick Castle. I think it was a really nice spot. There's some gardens there as well. We didn't really get the chance to look around. Our next one is Lacock itself. I think for Lacock, I will put it in worth a detour. Although, as I've said, if you're going to see Lacock Abbey, you're going to see Lacock. There's some really lovely old buildings there. Lots of filming went on in Lacock for this and others, and it's really a very beautiful, quintessentially English, medieval-esque town with those sort of medieval elements to it. A lot of lovely old houses. Beautiful spot. Next up, we have Lambeth Bridge. So, of course, we see the night bus careening over Lambeth Bridge. We don't really see much more of Lambeth Bridge. It is a kind of nice bridge. It's got its own history. I think it's in the area. I would put this in, maybe not, but it is a London location. There are quite a few London locations. There's a good chance you'll cross the bridge yourselves if you're going from one to the other to where you're staying or whatnot. So we'll go down there. Of course, no actors ever went there. It was just some filming at night, some CGIing of buses. But it's a cool spot. The next location we have is Leadenhall Market. Now, this is a very nice one. This is a very pottery one and feels very Philosopher's Stone, this location. I think this location is the main London location. One of the main London locations, definitely. So I'm going to put it up there. It is a nice spot. It's a really interesting little market that dates back hundreds of years. It's a great spot to hide Diagon Alley. Speaking of, we have the Leaky Cauldron, the entrance to Diagon Alley. So this is just a little building now. We saw it getting painted. It has now been painted from what I've seen. I think this one's an in the area one, but considering how close it is to Leadenhall Market, you'll probably end up going there, probably take a picture. We don't see this entrance to the Leaky Cauldron again, unfortunately. But it's still a nice one, and it's worth visiting if you're in that part of London. Now we've got the Leaky Cauldron's second spot. Now I think this one is going to have to be a maybe not, because it wasn't exactly the most interesting of locations to begin with. But as there's a big sort of marquee out front, there's nothing really to relate it to what it used to be. If you are very close, or like me, you're very keen, by all means go to it, but I don't think it really has the same impact as some of these other locations. It has changed quite significantly over the years. Our next location is Loch Arkaig, so we've hit all of the lochs now. This is an interesting one. I think I might have to put this in maybe not. The problem with this one is that single track road that I mentioned in the full video, and how long that single track road is. Now, we didn't really approach it at the best time of day and had to sort of bail out partway through. Because of whereabouts they filmed with this one, and it being on the other side of the loch, you have to go in a sort of loop around and all the way up to the other side of the loch to actually get to the filming location. We had to bail out halfway through. All of us were feeling quite carsick at this point due to the nature of this really winding and a hilly road. I have brought it up because it was an actual filming location that the actual actors went to on the bank on the far side, so I do think it's worth it if you can spend the time to get there and aren't going to get too car sick on that road. But the next one, Loch Etive. This one is my favourite of these lochs. It really is. I think this one is worth taking a special visit to. That's where I'm ranking it anyway, because no doubt you can get to quite a lot of these filming locations in Scotland within a day or two. Loch Etive is particularly special because so much is filmed there prior to, of course, it being Dumbledore's grave. So it's quite poetic in a sense that we see this little island so many times throughout, and then that ends up being the island Dumbledore is buried on. We usually see it from this side, but the footage of the train at the end of my video was actually taken from the other side, so it's really nice. The train follows the edge of the loch, and it is seen so many times with the train going down the side, which is just an absolutely stunning shot and really makes me want to ride the Jacobite. It's definitely an amazing loch. Next up we have Glen Etive. This one is a remarkable spot as well. It's a little harder to get to. You have to go down this single track. Not as bad as Loch Arkaig. That one, this one's got passing places, loads of passing places, and it seems to be quite busy going too. The road that you have to take to get to Loch Etive actually featured in James Bond Skyfall, which is interesting as well. I think because it didn't appear quite as much and doesn't have the Dumbledore's grave and the train, it's not quite Loch Etive level for me, but it was a remarkable spot and I was very pleased with a lot of the drone footage I got. Of course, I only got to show a fraction of that footage, but I really enjoyed flying the drone there. Very windy, but a really nice spot. We'll put it worth a detour. It's worth driving out to on your way up into Scotland or your way back. Next one we have is Loch Morar. So I really enjoyed our time at Loch Morar. The four of us who went, pulled up our cars facing the loch, and just had a wonderful time being so isolated and taking so many lovely photos and getting loads of really nice filming of the loch, and just hanging out there for a while was one of the highlights, if not one of the best bits of our trip to Scotland. However, as a Harry Potter location, it's not really got too much. There's no specific things like the island or the camping spot. So I think this one's going to be in the area. We'll put it in a worth a detour. It was a really nice spot. Our next loch is Loch Shiel. Now this is the one that we see Hogwarts on the side of the bank, with it being so close as well to the Glenfinnan Viaduct, and you'll be able to see them both at the same time. It is definitely worth it. Again, it's just a really nice loch. All of these lochs are absolutely wonderful. Looking up at the mountains around is just so outstanding. Definitely worth it if you're doing a Scotland visit. Not much more to say about that one. It is the home of Hogwarts, so it's definitely worth it. Our next location is Malham Cove. Malham Cove is a really cool spot. I have been there quite a few times over the years. Obviously, we have that scene with Harry and Hermione, or a few separate small scenes with Harry and Hermione at the top there. Usually you would park in the village of Malham, and there's this lovely walk that goes through these three different locations. You've got Janet's Foss, Goredale Scar, and Malham Cove. And Goredale Scar was used as a filming location for The Witcher Season 2, I believe. They're all really lovely locations. Janet's Foss is a beautiful little waterfall and a pool, and Goredale Scar and Malham Cove are really impressive to see as well. Of course, it's quite out of the way. It's north of Skipton. It's not really near many other locations. In fact, the only other location it is really near is Grassington Moor. It's quite isolated, this one. But you know, we'll put it in worth a detour, I think. It's a very cool spot. Next up, we have the Ministry of Magic. We have Scotland Yard, Great Scotland Yard. It's a cool little location. It's very London, and it's not far from some of the other places on this list. I think this one we'll put into worth a detour. Of course, there isn't as much to see there as you might think, because the phone box isn't really there, though there are some not far from it, and the bridge that was next to the phone box isn't there either, because that was a part of the set added on. Next up we have New College in Oxford. Not a new college at all, this one, but a cool little Harry Potter filming location, and as you might already be in Oxford visiting a couple of these ones, I think this one is worth it too. I think we will put that in worth a detour. I don't think it's quite as impressive as these two. It wasn't too costly to visit though, which was a very good thing, and it is a nice little quaint cloister area. Only used in Goblet of Fire. It is a very memorable scene though, and right next to pretty much the Bodleian Library, so definitely worth seeing if you're ever in Oxford. Next up we've got the street where Harry boards the night bus. Now this one of course is just a plain street, and if it were anywhere else pretty much I would say maybe not, don't bother. The park behind doesn't exist and the road seems to have changed slightly. But with it being so close to the studio, there's a good chance you'll end up seeing it anyway. It's genuinely right across the street. You can see the big light up sign for the making of Harry Potter studio from the location, so if you're there it's definitely worth seeing. Next up, Piccadilly Circus. Now again, this is a central London location, and there's a good chance you'd end up there anyway if you are heading into London to view locations or anything else. I think as a Harry Potter location there's not much to it. We're only there very quickly in the film and moving on, but it is a famous spot in the UK, so it's definitely worth it if you're in London and going to these central London locations. But of course it's extremely busy there, hence the saying, it's like Piccadilly Circus. Next up is the Potter House in Lacock. I will put this with Lacock. It is again a private residence, so bear that in mind, don't go up to it. The walking tour stops at the end of the street, which is probably a good reference if you're wanting to view this location. Next up, the Prince of Wales Bridge. This one completely destroyed my walking boots. They have not recovered, so I'm probably going to rank it low because of that. We got some terrific shots while we were there due to the sunset, but in terms of Harry Potter filming locations, I don't think our actors ever went there. I don't know if any actors ever went there. Looking at that shot and how far away our actors are, and having stood on that mud myself, I think they were probably added in post. I'm going to put it in maybe not. It is fairly close to some of the locations, but if you're thinking of spending more time in Lacock or going all the way out to the bog underneath the Prince of Wales Bridge, maybe stick with spending a little bit of extra time in Lacock. Next up we have the real and original Privet Drive. And of course it's a private property in the middle of a residential street. So we, again, felt extremely awkward filming there, even though we filmed most of what we did right at the end of the street and didn't want to get any closer than we did, which was still quite a few houses away. And as long as you remember to be extremely respectful while you're there, it is an iconic Harry Potter location. I think I will put it in worth a detour. It's iconic, but it's someone's house. Our next location is Rannoch Moor. This is the moorland you practically drive past on your way to Fort William. It's easy to get to in a sense, though the train track itself is actually kind of on the other side of the moorland, so you would have to go all the way north and round and back down from where we were to get to that spot, and it's quite remote. I think if you're passing through, it's probably worth stopping off where we stopped or on one of the other parking areas along that road and just having a look, taking a couple of photos or something. But to go all the way around to the other side would take, I think, a couple of hours. So I think I'm going to have to put in the area for this one. Next up, we have the Reptile House in London Zoo. In terms of a Harry Potter filming location, to spend money on a ticket to go into the zoo to see it is probably not worth it, though the zoo itself, I'm sure it is. If you're in the area, and by area I mean if you're in the zoo. Next up is the Seven Sisters Cliffs that we see in the background when all of our protagonists arrive at the World Cup. Now, of course, we didn't really see them in the same way due to the fog, but I'm sure they would be absolutely splendid given the right conditions. Quite far away from any other Harry Potter filming locations, it took us a couple of hours to get from Watford, where we were staying, all the way down to the south coast there. I'll put it in worth a detour now, I think. I think that's fair. Next up we have Horace Slughorn's house. Again, a private residence. Be respectful if you do go there. I think this one's an in the area one. It's alright, it's pretty cool, but you're probably going to be in Lacock seeing the Abbey and the rest of the town, so it's worth it if you're in the area, if you're in Lacock. Next up we have Speen Bridge Station. Now, I know this was used for filming, but I don't think anything was actually filmed there per se. They picked up extras from Speen Bridge and took them through Rannoch Moor for the filming there. But as a filming location, it's probably a maybe not. Although we did film some extra stuff there.
Can we go now?
Our next location is St. Pancras. As you know, St. Pancras was used for exterior shots of King's Cross Station, and the two are right next to each other, so it's definitely worth checking out St. Pancras if you're there. It's some really impressive architecture, and that front section that we see is actually the Midland Hotel that was constructed onto the facade there in the 1800s. And of course, I'm going to have to put it up here with King's Cross. Actually, I'll put it one below King's Cross because it is just exterior scenes, whereas stuff was actually filmed inside King's Cross with the actors. Next up we have St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Now, I didn't go inside this one, but it's still a really, really impressive building. It was even used for some shots for Fantastic Beasts as well. I think if you're in London, this one is definitely one to do, and I think at some point I will explore going inside. I'll see if I can go inside and see that staircase. That would be an interesting one. I don't know if you can. Next up we have Surbiton Station. We all know what was filmed here. It's in London. It's not too far on the train. I think it might have been only 20 or something minutes on the train. It's an interesting station because of all the trains that come hurtling down through the middle really, really quickly, which is very cool. In terms of a filming location, a fair few bits happen there. Dumbledore and Harry, of course, prior to their apparating, and then the stuff in the cafe as well. It's not one of the most impressive places on its own, but a lot was filmed there, so I think it's worth the visit if you're in the area. Our next one is Swinley Forest. Swinley Forest was huge. It really was, and we spent so long walking around it trying to find the exact locations. I think this one is going to have to be an in the area. If you're in the area and want to check it out, sure. It's quite near the original Privet Drive and not too far from the studio, all on that side of London. And I got some kind of nice footage, some nice drone footage there, but some of the other locations are much more impressive in my mind. Next up we have Abbotsbury Swannery. Now, due to the nature of us trying to do as many locations as we could, as quickly as possible, by the time we got to this spot, Abbotsbury Swannery had closed. So I cannot tell you what it's like to visit Abbotsbury Swannery itself. We went quite near it and walked down the beach as far as we were allowed to go, prior to it being blocked off due to it being breeding season for the swans. We did catch 1 or 2 swans that came quite close to us, and there were a lot in the distance. There was loads in the distance. There were so many swans, but of course we didn't get to go there and see what it was like, so it's hard for me to say, really. It is very far out from any of the other locations, really. The closest ones will be Lacock, but it is still quite a drive from there. They didn't film anything there with actors. It was all getting helicopter shots and stuff of the reeds. And of course you can't go just running through the reeds. That would be quite a bad idea. I think this one's going to be an in the area. Abbotsbury Swanery itself might be a gorgeous place to visit. I'm sure it's really nice. But we didn't really get the opportunity to do that, so I can't really speak for that. Next up is the Millennium Bridge. Now, if you're going to St. Paul's Cathedral, you're going to be right next to the Millennium Bridge. If you're going to a lot of these central London locations, you're probably going to end up using the Millennium Bridge at some point, or at least being very close. So I think we'll put it up here with St. Paul's Cathedral. Our next location is Torrenlochen. Now this one, I am not sure what they used it for. I read about this one in a lovely little book called Harry Potter on Location, which mentions filming there for The Prisoner of Azkaban, specifically the Dementor attack. Now I'm not exactly sure when that could have been, because to me, all of that appears to be set work. Looking at the size of the trees and stuff. That said, it was an absolutely stunning spot to visit. It was so lovely. It was awfully buggy, but it was really nice. The reflections are just beautiful, and the colours from the flowers were amazing. And then the fact that a deer actually jumped out and was almost within arm's reach at one point when it went past us is just outstanding. What a moment, what a location. My goodness. Everlasting memories. With it being so very close to Hagrid's hut, I think it's worth taking a visit. If you're doing Hagrid's hut, just go down the road a little bit. On your left, there's this gate. Just have a look at that gorgeous little lock. There's a little walk, I think, that goes around that little lock as well, that I saw some people doing. We didn't, because we were getting far too eaten by the bugs and had to move on to our next locations. Next up, we've got Virginia Waters. Now, this was a really, really lovely spot. Surprisingly lovely. I got some really nice shots of the water just being so clear and stuff. This is where Harry is leaning against that tree before the owl comes and starts bothering him. Cue, I'm not an owl. I think this one can go in the worth a detour spot. There's a nice little waterfall there that you go past when you're heading to the filming location, and it's just really nice. It's quite busy. It is quite busy, but it's a nice spot to walk around. So lastly, we have the Palace of Westminster and Westminster Underground. I'm including that one in this too. Now, in terms of Harry Potter filming locations, they would probably be a maybe not, but of course, you know, this is Big Ben we're talking about here. It is so iconic, and Harry Potter is very British, and I think its Britishness gives it that sort of quirky charm, and of course, Big Ben is so famous, so synonymous with Britain that it makes sense to see it. I think it's worth seeing as a Harry Potter fan. That has been my ranking of the Harry Potter filming locations. If you would like to rank them yourself, there will be a link in the description. Please do check out this video right here. It's been selected just for you. YouTube thinks you're going to like it. Worth a shot. And I'll see you in the next video. Class dismissed.